You'll never be able to fix it. They laughed at her, but what she did next, no one saw coming. Don't forget to comment what country you're watching us from. Marta didn't look up. Her jaw was clenched and her knuckles were tight as she turned the wrench. She could feel everyone watching her with a mix of mockery and contempt. The engine in front of her seemed designed to fail. Someone had given her this truck as a test, but she knew the truth. It wasn't a test of skill. It was a disguised humiliation. The workshop owner, Don Rogelio, had smiled at her when he handed her the keys, and right behind him, the elegant man in the gray suit had said aloud, as if passing sentence, "They'll never have the ability." Everyone laughed. Marta did not. The man in the suit was Esteban Lacayo, an arrogant millionaire who didn't trust anyone who didn't wear a tie, and certainly not a woman with grease on her face. His truck had a problem with the injection system that none of the other mechanics had been able to fully diagnose. But that wasn't why they gave it to Marta. They gave it to her because they knew she would fail. It was the perfect way to reaffirm with laughter the old belief that a woman among machinery is just decoration. As Marta inspected the connections, she heard the whispers behind her. "She's going to break something. We should put a pink ribbon on the engine. This isn't for her." The words were knives in her back. The worst part wasn't the contempt, but that it came from those who were supposed to be her colleagues. When she asked for help with a special tool, one of them answered between laughs, "Oh, you want to play mechanic? Or are you going to cry now?" She didn't look at him. She couldn't give him the satisfaction. Every time Marta found an anomaly, or managed to identify a fault, the men found something else to invalidate her. It was never enough. She wasn't there on a whim. She had worked as her father's assistant for years, even when he got sick and lost the family workshop. She had studied on her own, got certified, and passed exams that many of those present would have failed without a doubt, but none of that mattered. To them, Marta was an intruder, an uncomfortable figure who challenged the world they wanted to keep intact. And now, seeing her with stained hands, forcing a rusty nut, they all felt certain they were right. Esteban, his arms crossed, came close enough for his breath to be felt on the back of Marta's neck. "Do yourself a favor, girl. Accept that you weren't born for this. We won't judge you if you give up. On the contrary, you'd be doing yourself a favor." The laugh he let out afterward was dry, cruel, as if he were spitting out every word. Marta didn't answer, but something inside her was burning. It wasn't just pride. It was the memory of her father. It was the lost workshop. It was all the times she had to hold back so as not to lose an opportunity. A couple of mechanics were secretly recording with their phones, waiting for the exact moment Marta would fail to upload it to social media and turn it into a viral joke. She knew it, but she also knew that the only thing she had to do was stay calm. The engine had an intermittent fault. It wasn't a lack of skill that made it complicated, but that someone had already tampered with it and misadjusted some parts on purpose. Marta began to suspect it when she noticed that the MAF sensor line was subtly disconnected. It wasn't a common mistake. It was sabotage. Sabotage's plan to make her look ridiculous. "What's wrong? Given up already?" one of them yelled from the back, provoking even louder laughter. Marta gritted her teeth, reconnected the line, and when she did, she heard a slight change in the system. She was close, but she wasn't going to rush. She knew that was the goal, to pressure her until she broke. And if she failed, they would make sure she knew it was because of her nature. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on what you think of it. Esteban turned to Don Rogelio and said in a mocking but firm voice, "I told you this was a waste of time. Women don't have the ability. This is real mechanics, not a cooking game." Don Rogelio looked down and didn't answer. He knew it was wrong, but he had too many commitments to Esteban. Marta heard everything. She gripped the wrench even tighter, not because of the bolt, but because it was the only way not to explode with rage. At that moment, one of the mechanics came up behind her and, without hiding it, tried to move the tool in her hand, pretending to help her. "Let me, you've already wasted a lot of time," he said. But what no one expected was Marta's reaction, because that moment marked a before and after, but you still can't imagine how it all ended. The mechanic's attempt to snatch the tool from her was the straw that broke the last thread of her self-control. Marta yanked her arm away forcefully, looked him straight in the eye, and with a firm voice, without raising her tone, said, "Don't ever touch me while I'm working again. Not you, not anyone." An uncomfortable silence fell over the workshop. For the first time all day, the laughter disappeared. The mechanic stepped back without a word, but Esteban, seeing the game slipping from his grasp, snapped his fingers and gave a subtle but venomous order. "Enough wasting time. Get her out of there." And then two of the workers moved forward to pull her away from the engine by force. Marta stood her ground. She didn't back down an inch. As one of them brushed her arm, a metallic roar echoed through the workshop. It was the sound of the engine suddenly starting. The hood vibrated, and everyone froze. No one had managed to do that in weeks. Esteban's eyes widened, but instead of being surprised, he frowned. "It must have been luck. That engine is damaged at its core," he muttered. Marta said nothing, only slowly lowered the hood and walked toward the diagnostic panel with a steady pace. She connected the scanner. On the screen, "System Stabilized" appeared. The sabotage had been reversed. Don Rogelio swallowed hard, visibly uncomfortable. He knew Marta was right from the beginning, but his fear of losing the millionaire client had made him an accomplice to the mistreatment. Esteban, on the other hand, crossed his arms with a cynical smile. "Do you want an award for fixing something you probably damaged yourself?" He tossed into the air, hoping someone would back him up, but this time, no one laughed. The mechanics were starting to look at Marta differently. One of them, the youngest, lowered his head and said in a low voice, "I disconnected the sensor. I was ordered to. I thought it was just a joke." A murmur of discomfort ran through the group. The confession landed like a hammer. Marta looked at him with disappointment, but not hatred. "And you think it's funny to ruin the work of someone who just wants to do things right?" she asked, her voice broken but firm. The young man shook his head in shame. Esteban, for his part, exploded. "This is nonsense. This place is a disgrace. You..." But he was interrupted by Don Rogelio, who finally raised his voice. "That's enough, Esteban. This has gone too far. I allowed it, and I admit it, but Marta has more courage and ability than anyone here, myself included." The silence returned, this time heavy with shame. Marta slowly took off her gloves, wiped her hands on a dirty rag, and walked toward the workshop door. No one dared to stop her, but just before leaving, she turned and said with a steady voice, "I'm not here to convince you. I'm here because I earned it. If you can't handle that, that's not my problem." It was then that the oldest of the mechanics, a man with gray hair and trembling hands, approached her and said, "I'm sorry, my girl. I laughed too, but I didn't feel right about it. You brought the soul back to this workshop." The old man's words set off a chain reaction. Little by little, several of the workers began to approach her, to offer sincere apologies. They weren't grand gestures. It wasn't a spectacle, it was humanity. Esteban, humiliated, tried to regain his position of authority. "This isn't over. I'm leaving with my truck, and I'll never be back," he threatened. But Don Rogelio was clear. "Do what you want." But here, she proved who she is, and so did you. In the following weeks, Marta was promoted to head mechanic, not because it was handed to her, but because she earned it with talent, patience, and character. Her story began to circulate among clients who returned to the workshop out of respect, not necessity. The young man who confessed to the sabotage was fired, but before he left, he wrote her a letter, thanking her for teaching him that sexism disguised as jokes can destroy careers. Esteban never returned, but his company began to lose contracts after his behavior was leaked on social media. The video of Marta fixing the truck went viral, not as a joke, but as a symbol of dignity. You never know who is behind the mask. Appearances can be deceiving, but respect and dignity must always be non-negotiable.